Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. You might have noticed that the music that I had playing at the beginning of this video is different from what we've had in the past, and that's because that is actually a recording that I and my bandmate Chris I've put together for an upcoming album. That intro is the famous Pennsylvania Dutch folk song "High Lee, High Low," played on mountain dulcimer. I'll have a future video down the road talking about the album when it's ready to be sold and you can get your own copy. But you'll hear that now at the beginning of all of these videos, your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute, just because, well, why not, I guess. So today's video is another in our series on famous Pennsylvania Dutch men and women. Today we would like to focus our attention on the Reverend Henry Harbaugh. Some of you might recognize that name. For some of you, it might be the first time you heard him. So we'll talk a little bit about his life and, most importantly, his legacy, which for us as Pennsylvania Dutch is quite important. What Reverend Harbaugh did, and I'll talk about that. So let's jump right in. Henry Harbaugh was a preacher, a minister, a teacher, and for us, most importantly, an author who was born on the 28th of October, 1817 in Waynesboro, Franklin County, Pennsylvania. Now, Franklin County, that's out in a little bit west of what I would consider central PA. It's kind of out of the realm of traditional Pennsylvania Dutch country, but it reminds us that there were a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch that did settle west of the Susquehanna beyond York County and Adams County. Franklin's the next one going west. So I think we always just concentrate on, the four core: Berks, Lehigh, Lebanon, and Lancaster. But we have to remember that there were and there are a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch that live and lived outside of just those four counties. And here's a great example of another one from way on the western fringe, so to speak. Henry was the 10th child of George and Anna Snyder Harbaugh, who were hardworking and God-fearing parents. Wasn't everybody back then, who reared their children in the Pennsylvania Dutch language and the German Reformed faith. As Henry's grandfather, who had immigrated, had settled on land in this same area, the Harbaughs were well known and so dedicated to their faith that Henry's father, George, in time gave the land upon which has always been called the Harbaugh Church, which is out there in Franklin County. As Henry grew up, he eventually moved to Ohio for a couple of years, and in his late teens, early 20s, he would eventually return to Pennsylvania in 1840 when he began his studies at what was then called Marshall College and Seminary, located in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. He completed his studies in 1843 and also got married that year to Louisa Goodrich in December. He was then called to the ministry, having graduated with his degree in theology, and his first call was in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, which is right along the Susquehanna there in Union County. While ministering in Lewisburg, he became very active in the temperance movement and became an outspoken critic in his opposition to alcohol. One thing I read was in his efforts to stop one man's drinking, one of his congregants, he followed him into saloons, would drag him past others, and sat up with him at nights to make sure that he didn't go back to a life of alcohol. That was a great little story. In 1850, Harbaugh accepted a call from the First Reformed Church in Lancaster. He was 32 years old when he went there, and he immediately disliked what he considered the materialistic ways of the big city and encountered a congregation already riven with conflict between the English speakers, who were the majority, and the German speakers, who were the minority. His duties in this bilingual church included holding 3 services each Sunday, 2 in English, 1 in German, being in charge of the Sunday school, holding a catechetical class on Tuesday evenings throughout the year, leading an English prayer meeting on Wednesdays, attending young people's prayer meetings on Thursdays, leading a German prayer meeting on Fridays, and directing a children's singing class which gave a concert once a month to benefit missions. That is one crazy schedule when you think about it. 1850, every day he was doing something for the church and flipping between both languages. I think that's really interesting. And I can only imagine what the politics must have been like between those two language groups sharing one house of worship. I'm sure it got tense at times. That church you can visit. It is in downtown Lancaster. First Reformed. It's a beautiful brick church, and inside they do have a stained glass window in commemoration of Reverend Harbaugh's time there. Harbaugh sadly fell ill in and died in December of 1867, and he is buried out west in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, where today his old college, Marshall College, has now become the Mercersburg Academy. Um, so here's where we have to remember, like, why am I talking about this guy if he was just a reverend? Well, there's more to that. During his life, he was a prolific writer of church-based documents. He published many, many writings defending the Heidelberg Catechism and what became a lot of the the doctrine for the Reformed Church in America. Um, but he also, and here's where it becomes important for Pennsylvania Dutch, was he is of great importance, particularly his writings in Pennsylvania Dutch. After his death in 1867, his friend Mr. Bousman collected poetry that Harbaugh had written in Pennsylvania Dutch and published them in the year 1870 under the title of Harbaugh's Harfe, or translated Harbaugh's Harp. This book is one of the first and most important publications in the Pennsylvania Dutch language. His collection of poetry is beautiful, and his famous poem Das Alt Schulhaus an der Creek, or The Old Schoolhouse on the Creek, is often quoted and extremely well loved. Many Pennsylvania Dutch families have and had copies of this important book. Maybe your family has a copy too laying around. Maybe it's up in the attic in Grandpa's box of stuff. Look for it. I showed a picture of it. It's a maroon hardcover with a gold embossed or a gold looking embossed harp. Um, there were multiple issues of this book put out over the years. Every couple years they'd reproduce it. But if you have one of those originals from 1870, that's a great little thing to have because it truly is, um, the earliest known, well, one of the earliest known publications in Pennsylvania Dutch. So some people do credit Harbaugh as the father of Pennsylvania Dutch literature, all in part to a book that came out 3 years after his death. His poetry is really beautiful. It gives us insight into what life was like in the mid 19th century. His use of the language is pretty. Um, I highly recommend the book is available in digital format online through the Gutenberg Project. I'll include a link to that so that you can click on it and read Harbaugh's Harfe. There are also multiple editions for sale on sites like Amazon and other bookstores online. If you search Harbaugh's Harfe, you can get your own copy. But we cannot underscore the importance of Henry Harbaugh and him getting writing in the dialect. He didn't have to do that, and we're very thankful that he did, as he fathered. He was the father of that movement in the late 1800s. Then for other people to follow in his footsteps, like Barba and Lloyd Mull and many, many others in that late 1800s, early 1900s time period where we really start to see the flourishing of Pennsylvania Dutch literature, both in prose and in poetry. So my hat off to Henry Harbaugh and all that he did for not only the church in America, but also all that he did specifically for Pennsylvania Dutch. So there you go. Hey, if you have an idea for a future video, if there's a famous Pennsylvania Dutchman or Dutchwoman that I haven't done a video on yet that you think I should be doing a video on, please send me an email. My address is at the end. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, gosh darn it, you gotta do that. And even though this video didn't practice any Pennsylvania Dutch, you best be practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch when you're not watching these videos. It's the only way you're going to get better and pass that language on to other people. All right, till next time, send me an email, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and Mox Good.
That's good.